No empire collapses in a single moment. It starts with one mistake, small enough to ignore, dangerous enough to grow, and then everything spirals. For Russia, that mistake was a decision made with absolute confidence, backed by decades of military doctrine, political ambition, and the belief that the world would never dare to challenge them. A decision that looked, at first, like a show of strength. But in reality, it was the opening act of a disaster. This is the story of how one miscalculation, one strategic error, set off a chain reaction powerful enough to shatter Russia's military image, drain its economy, divide its leadership, and send shockwaves across the globe. It's the story of failed intelligence, overconfidence, internal betrayal, and a battlefield reality far more brutal than anyone in Moscow expected. But above all, it's the story of how a single decision, made in a room full of generals who believed they were untouchable, lit the fuse of a collapse that no one could stop. Stay with us to the very end. Because what happened next didn't just change Russia. It changed the world. The story of Russia's route to Crimea does not start with explosions, drone strikes, or military defeats. It begins with something far more subtle, the quiet decay of a strategy built on fragile ground. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, it believed that establishing a land route, supported by heavy military presence, would secure permanent control over the peninsula. But beneath the surface, the corridor was weak from its very birth. The regions it passed through were never fully aligned with Moscow. Ukrainian intelligence networks remained active. Local populations were uncertain or resistant. The land itself was narrow, exposed, and easy to disrupt. Analysts warned for years that the route was unsustainable, yet Russia pressed forward, believing strength alone could overcome geography and political reality. This was the first mistake, one that would echo for a decade. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, the corridor to Crimea became one of Moscow's top priorities. On maps, it looked solid. Cities like Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Mariupol fell under Russian control, forming a seemingly uninterrupted connection. But the truth was different. The corridor was more illusion than reality. Ukrainian intelligence and special forces had never left the region. Resistance movements quietly grew stronger. Supply convoys were monitored, targeted, and slowed. The foundation of the corridor, already fragile, became a battlefield of shadows, where sabotage, secrecy, and precision mattered more than front lines. Russia believed the corridor was secure. Ukraine knew it was only beginning to crumble. Ukraine understood that it did not need to destroy the route in a single, dramatic attack. Instead, it adopted an asymmetrical strategy, relentlessly targeting the corridor's most vulnerable points. Supply depots, ammunition warehouses, command centers, and fuel hubs came under precise Ukrainian fire. Strikes did not stop the corridor immediately, but they weakened its spine. Every hit forced Russia to repair, reroute, or delay supplies. Over time, the corridor transformed from a stable route into a high-risk zone where nothing moved safely. The collapse had begun, slowly, methodically, invisibly. The Kerch Strait Bridge was the crown jewel of Russia's connection to Crimea, a symbol of dominance, engineering, and permanence. But symbols can be fragile. Ukraine recognized the vulnerability early and struck the bridge multiple times with explosive precision. Each attack halted traffic. Each explosion damaged morale. Each repair strained Russia's already stretched logistics. The Kerch Bridge was supposed to be untouchable. Instead, it became proof that the entire Crimean connection could be disrupted with a single strike. And once the bridge's reliability fell, pressure on the land corridor increased dramatically. Russia's logistical system was never prepared for a long, high-intensity conflict. Corruption shaped supply chains. Manpower shortages weakened road security. Convoys lacked proper protection. Trucks broke down due to poor maintenance. Soldiers reported delays, shortages, and constant fear. Ukrainian sabotage missions targeted rail lines. Explosions on tracks caused weeks of paralysis. Even when Russia increased defenses, it was never enough. The corridor needed constant protection, something Russia could not provide. Internal weakness became just as destructive as enemy fire. What began as reconnaissance soon evolved into one of the most effective military drone programs in modern warfare. Ukraine's drones grew in range, precision, and capability. They hunted convoys, mapped troop movements, and identified every weak point in the corridor. Russian troops reported constant tension. They could hear drones at night, buzzing above them like a reminder that they were never safe. Even advanced Russian defenses struggled to intercept the swarms. Drones didn't just attack the corridor, they exposed its vulnerabilities over and over again. Image prompt, Part 6. Ukraine's offensives in the Zaporizhia region did not need to break through completely. They only needed to apply pressure. And pressure they delivered. Russian forces were forced to divert troops, stretch defenses, and lengthen supply routes. Every extra kilometer increased fuel demand, slowed logistics, and created new risks. The longer the route became, the more unsustainable it was. Russia constantly chased stability, yet stability kept slipping away. This was strategic warfare, slow, patient, and devastating. Sanctions tightened. Fuel restrictions increased. Export limits strangled manufacturing. Russia's ability to maintain its massive military supply chain began to erode. Without spare parts, trucks broke down. Without stable banking channels, procurement stalled. Without international support, logistics collapsed piece by piece. A war corridor cannot survive when every economic artery feeding it is blocked. The world wasn't just watching. It was squeezing. Crimea depended not only on land transport, but also on the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Ukraine understood this and launched a maritime campaign that shocked the world. Drone boats, anti-ship missiles, and targeted naval strikes forced Russia to retreat from key positions and abandon parts of the sea. With the Black Sea becoming a danger zone, sea routes to Crimea weakened. Russia had no choice but to rely more heavily on the already unstable land corridor, accelerating its eventual collapse. The sea, once a shield, became another battlefield Russia could not control. Behind enemy lines, far from the cameras, partisan groups carried out sabotage operations with precision and courage. They attacked fuel depots, cut power lines, planted explosives on rail tracks, and disrupted communications. Their impact was enormous, slowing Russia down, draining manpower, and forcing Moscow to divert thousands of troops to guard areas far from the front. The corridor became not just a supply route, but a battlefield of shadows. Every night brought new explosions. Every morning revealed new damage. Without these partisan strikes, the collapse would have taken far longer. Maintaining the corridor was never cheap, but as the conflict intensified, the cost grew unbearable. Russia poured billions into repairing roads, replacing destroyed vehicles, constructing fortifications, and escorting convoys. Fuel consumption skyrocketed. Ammunition had to be transported over long, dangerous routes. Engineers worked day and night to repair bridges and tracks, only for Ukraine to strike them again. The Kremlin faced a harsh reality. Every dollar spent on the corridor weakened Russia's ability to invest elsewhere, economically, politically, and militarily. A war fought with strained finances is a war fought on borrowed time. Russia's leadership believed Ukraine would collapse quickly. They believed Western unity would fracture. They believed long-range weapons would not reach deep into occupied territories. Every assumption proved wrong. Ukraine adapted faster, fought harder, and planned smarter than Moscow expected. Overconfidence turned into strategic blindness. While Russia reacted slowly to emerging threats, Ukraine moved with agility, launching precise strikes just as Russia was adjusting to the previous blow. Miscalculations accumulated like cracks in concrete until the entire structure was ready to fall apart. As the corridor weakened, Russian troops stationed along it felt increasingly isolated. Drone attacks kept them awake at night. Mines turned every road into a gamble. Supply shortages left units without fuel, rations, or medical kits. Rumors of Ukrainian breakthroughs spread like wildfire, crushing morale. Troops began to distrust commanders. Internal complaints leaked online. Some units refused to advance, others retreated without orders. A route cannot function when the soldiers guarding it no longer believe in its mission, or its survival. For years, the Russia-Crimea corridor was presented as a symbol of victory, a permanent achievement carved into the map. But the harder Russia fought to defend it, the clearer it became that the symbol had become a liability. Endless reinforcements, endless repairs, endless losses. What was once a badge of strength transformed into a reminder of strategic overreach. Ukraine didn't need to destroy the symbol. It only needed to make it too expensive for Russia to protect. And slowly, relentlessly, that is exactly what happened. The final weakening began when Ukraine increased deep strike operations across Tokmak, Melitopol, and Jankoy, the backbone of Russian supply lines. These were not random attacks. They were coordinated, calculated, and devastating. Command centers were crippled. Fuel depots erupted into firestorms. Ammunition warehouses detonated in chain reactions. Rail junctions became twisted steel and craters. Every hit forced Russia to reroute supplies through longer, more vulnerable paths. The corridor was still standing, but barely. With the supply chain shattered, chaos rippled across Russian positions. Units lacked ammunition at critical moments. Fuel shortages stranded armored columns. Trucks broke down and were abandoned. Medical supplies ran out in frontline hospitals. Frozen bottlenecks stretched for kilometers. Commanders argued over priorities. Some requested reinforcements, others demanded withdrawals. But the real problem was simple. Nothing could move reliably anymore. A military machine collapses when its arteries, the supply lines, are cut. As Russia struggled to stabilize the corridor, Ukraine launched counterattacks at precisely the right times. They struck when fuel was low, when units were exhausted, when reinforcements were delayed. Ukrainian intelligence mapped Russian weaknesses and exploited them with surgical timing. What Russia saw as isolated problems, Ukraine saw as connected opportunities. Every small Ukrainian advance forced Russia to stretch its lines further, draining the corridor's last remaining strength. This was warfare as chess, and Ukraine was playing the board perfectly. After years of strikes, sabotage, sanctions, battles, and internal failures, the corridor to Crimea finally passed the point of no return. Russia could no longer supply its forces reliably. Troops withdrew from exposed sections. Convoys slowed to a crawl or stopped entirely. Some routes were abandoned altogether. Ukraine didn't need a dramatic, single blow. The collapse happened through attrition, pressure, and patience. The once permanent route was now a mosaic of broken roads, cratered rail lines, and deserted military posts. The Crimea connection had effectively collapsed. The fall of the corridor was not just a battlefield loss. It was a geopolitical earthquake. Russia's ambitions in the Black Sea region were shattered. The perception of Russian military strength was damaged internationally. Meanwhile, Ukraine proved its strategic adaptability, intelligence superiority, and resilience under pressure. The collapse reshaped global military doctrine. Modern warfare is not only about capturing territory, it is about sustaining it. And Russia could not sustain what it tried to hold. As the dust settles, one truth is clear. The fall of Russia's route to Crimea will shape the next decade of geopolitics. The region's balance of power has shifted. Ukraine's success will influence future military strategies. Russia will need to rethink not just its tactics, but its core assumptions. The corridor that once symbolized Moscow's triumph has become a lesson in strategic overreach, logistical fragility, and the power of targeted, patient resistance. This is not the end of the conflict, but it is the end of one of its most important chapters.